Okay, this section here, TSO, ISPF, and SDSF. For anyone that's actually on the remote, could you raise your hand if you've never heard of these acronyms? For those of you remote, how many have never heard of TSO, ISPF, and SDSF? Raise your hand. Okay, so we have one person, Justin, and Justin obviously is, as we found out earlier, he's very new to the environment. He's never heard of TSO, ISPF, and SDSF. So I'm going to lower Justin's hand. For those that are remote, raise your hand if you had heard of these terms before, TSO, ISPF, and SDSF, any or all of them. Okay, very good. And we have 3 people that are a little bit familiar with it. So I'm going to lower the hands. So by the time we're done with this, you'll be able to describe, and for those of you that did get connected, you're going to use TSO. For those of you that are connected, you'll be able to describe and use ISPF. The same is true for SDSF. And for those of you that are connected, we're going to be using the ISPF editor. And I'll be talking about that. By the end of this session, I want you to be able to locate the TSO, ISPF, and SDSF manuals. So for those of you that didn't get connected, you can just observe the screen, and there's a very good chance that we won't get through all of this before the lunch break. So I'm going to advance to the next screen. So terminology. TSO stands for Time Sharing Option. Many times you may know this as a command line interface, a CLI. You basically get a ready prompt. In the ready prompt, you can type in commands. This is very much like DOS, which is a command line interface. And one thing about TSO, TSO's been around for decades, but it predated full screen things. So TSO is really line oriented, and it has a text, it's obviously text oriented, but it's a line oriented interface. There's no full screen support. So what happens is when you log on using a TN3270 emulator to what's called TSO, the administrators typically automatically invoke a panel-driven interface called ISPF, known as the Interactive System Productivity Facility. Well, what ISPF does, it requires TSO as the base, but all it's really doing is calling programs and calling scripts that actually provide programs to you and utilities to do full screen things. So it's ISPF is a panel-driven interface using TSO as the background. Now, SDSF stands for System Display and Search Facility. It's like an ISPF, but you can invoke SDSF from ISPF. But SDSF, it also requires TSO as the base. It's panel-driven, but it has a special function of looking at your input queues, output queues, to see what's executing, to potentially issue operator commands. And so SDSF has some features and functions available to it that ISPF does not have. So I'm going to proceed to the next page. So 3270 applications. It turns out TSO is a 3270 application. And TSO, ISPF, and SDSF are very fundamental navigation interfaces. And of course, they get used using a 3270 emulator, which is text-based. They're also used for application development. Many decades ago, it was the primary interface for application development. It continues to be an application development interface, but it's also a system programmer interface and an administrator interface, whether it be security, database administration, CICS administration. From TSO, ISPF, and SDSF, you can also submit things to be processed in the background. So I'm going to proceed to the next slide. Now, one thing that's sometimes a little bit that you got to get used to in the 3270 fields, the 3270 panels are actually programmed very much like HTML, but the syntax is different. And when you code a 3270 screen, you can actually have protected fields and unprotected fields. In the protected fields, you're not allowed to type into. Unprotected fields allow data entry. Now, if you use the tab key many times will actually tab you to the next unprotected field. If you try to type into a protected field, many times you'll see a little stick man at the bottom of your screen, and that just says, hey, you're trying to type into an area you're not allowed to type into. So many times you can do a reset or just hit the tab key again to get out of the field. Now, another thing about 3270 navigation, as I mentioned earlier, the cursor movement is done. You can use the arrow keys to move the cursor around, the tab key, or you can simply use the mouse click to place your cursor somewhere in unprotected fields. There's also a special key that we'll talk about later that you'll need to find on your emulator called a PA1 key. That stands for Program Attention Interrupt. You may start to execute something that may be flooding a whole bunch of information on your screen. And how do you break out of that program? It's through the Program Attention key. If ever you have a locked keyboard, little stick man's there, there's also a reset key that would clear that, and so you can move to an unprotected field. Once again, the 3 asterisks, if ever you see that in a TSO session, that means that it requires enter to proceed. You won't see the 3 asterisks in ISPF because it's full screen mode. You see the 3 asterisks in TSO, which is line oriented. I'm going to proceed to the next page. So as we saw earlier, and for those of you that do get connected, you can follow along if you would like, or you can just observe. So right now, for those of you that did get connected, you know that you can configure your emulator to go to an IP address and a port number that whoever set up the system has given you. You'll see the sign-on screen at that port number that you were assigned, which in our case is 623. The sign-on screen, you'll see that the sign-on screen is going to be different for different systems because the system programmer went over there and just created the screen. Also, the way you get logged on, that also is a system programmer choice and determined. So in this case, this screen here, you can type in log on and the user ID, or you can type in TSO to move forward to the password screen. So once you get to the password screen, you'll type in your password and enter. You'll see the system messages come out. Once the system messages come out, it'll eventually take you to the ISPF Primary Option Menu. For those of you that are just observing, remember that these screenshots are here for you to practice a little bit later. As I mentioned earlier, if you just depress enter, that licensed material message will go away. Now, one thing that I'm doing here is actually showing you how you log off. But if you're following along, you don't need to log off. Now, one thing I want to point out is from TSO, notice we got the ready prompt here, I could type in SDSF and go to the SDSF. However, I can tell you that we do have an option off of the ISPF menu to get to SDSF. what I'm going to do right now is just demonstrate SDSF. So if you go into SDSF, you'll actually be at the SDSF Primary Option Menu. So it's got a primary option menu like ISPF has a primary option menu. However, there's different features and functions that we'll talk about a little bit later. From the TSO READY prompt, I'm in TSO because it says READY. It's the command line interface. If I want to invoke ISPF, I just type in ISPF, and it finds the environment, and it would bring up the ISPF Primary Option Menu. Now notice on this screen, my option line is at the top. The reason it's at the top is because I actually went into the 0 settings and removed the slash from the area that said command line at the bottom. The reason I don't like my command line at the bottom is for cut and paste. Cut and paste works much better when your command line is at the top in different areas. So I'm going to talk about TSO a little bit more. So TSO is primarily a base environment for ISPF and SDSF. It's rarely used interactively. It's got a limited set of commands, but it can execute programs and scripts, and there's innovative batch executions you can do from there. You can call programs from there. You can allocate a bunch of things and call programs. I'm going to be giving you some examples of using the TSO environment interactively. And let me see if I've got panels for that. I do. So those of you that are actually, if you actually do get logged on to TSO, and when I say that, let's say, for instance, you get logged on, and once you log on, we automatically put you in the ISPF environment. If you want to get to TSO, you type in =X, and you might get an intermediate screen, and that's for where it's logged commands. If you see the intermediate screen, you'll see that there's a number selection, 2 just to delete it, for example. But for those of you that want to try this, I want you to get to the READY prompt. So if you're in ISPF, you'll do an =X. If you get an intermediate screen, you just type in the number to delete the log. Then you will be presented with the READY prompt. Once you're presented with the READY prompt, here's what I would like for you to do. And I'll tell you what, I would like to see a show of hands for anyone that's actually doing this interactively, because I may use you as an example. So Dudley, I see that you're on the TSO, and anyone else that's logged on to TSO, please let me know when I say logged on with the READY prompt. Okay, I see Lisa also is the READY prompt, and you guys, and the people in the room have the READY prompt. So for those of you, the reason I asked is because you're going to find that I'm going to have you do a couple things where I'm going to get you in a little bit of trouble here, and you need to get out of trouble. Okay, I'm going to lower everyone's hand. What I would like for you to do, type in profile, just the word profile, and enter. You'll notice when you type in profile that you have some information that controls the behavior of your TSO environment. We'll be looking at a little bit of those profile things. There's a couple in there that I like to change once in a while. Now, you'll get the READY prompt again. Just type in time, T-I-M-E, time. Now, for those of you in the room, when you typed in time on this machine, did it come back with IKJ something and then the time, or do you have just the time? Just the time, okay. Because we've changed the profile on some of our systems. Now, you'll notice that you get the READY prompt again, here's what I would like for you to do. On the screen that you're seeing, it says Profile NOMSGID. However, what I want you to type in is Profile MSGID. Type in Profile space MSGID and enter. Once you type in Profile MSGID, now type in time. You'll observe that you've typed in time twice. However, one has a message ID in front of it, one does not. Did you observe the message ID in front of it? Now, the reason that no message ID can be very useful is because sometimes you don't want things to wrap. And the message, by getting rid of the message ID, you get a nicer picture on your screen, and I'm going to show you an example of that later. Now what I would like for you to do is type in Profile no message ID. I want you to turn off the message ID. Profile space no message ID. Then type in LISTC as a command. LISTC. When you type in LISTC, it's going to come back with a couple of lines, or a number of lines, several lines, and it's going to say in catalog user, in this case it will probably say catalog user AA, and then you're going to see what's called data set names. Now I'm going to be describing what we just did here. What is this LISTC, and what are we looking at? We'll be describing that later. But notice we just did this one command, LISTC. And that stands for list catalog, but I'll explain what that really means later. Now here's what I would like for you to do. Type in, I'm going to immediately make you dangerous. Type in profile, no prefix. And no prefix is all one word. Profile, no prefix. Notice the no prefix is one word. Once again, if you do get 3 asterisks anywhere along the way, enter to proceed. And remember, enter is control on the right side. So now that you've done profile no prefix, type in the same command, LISTC. And so one person in the room said, oh dear, because what he's done is he typed in LISTC and it's just going on and on and on, listing things. So what just happened? Same command, totally different results. We'll be describing that a little bit later. I just want you to navigate. Now, the key here is to break out of it, you need to find the PA1 key. The PA1 key, in the emulator, there's usually an icon for it, or I believe it's Alt-Insert. It's a multi-punch. Alt.
Well, next 3270.
Alt-1. Yeah, there's a PA1 key, and depending upon the emulator you're using, you need to find it. Because this is going to go on and on and on. Anyone that did this and cannot find the PA1 key, and it's just going on and on, please raise your hand and I can do something to terminate the session so that you can find the PA1 key later. But anyone that cannot get out of this, please raise your hand. Okay, good. It appears that anyone that did this profile no prefix LISTC managed to find the PA1 key. So what I want you to do, going to the next page, if you type in profile right now, profile and enter, here's where I'm typing in the profile command, and you'll notice the output that comes back, one of the behavior settings is no message ID, and we now know what that means. Don't put a message number there. Also, the prefix is set to no prefix. So what I want you to do, where the cursor is, type in profile, space, prefix, open parentheses, your user ID, close parentheses, and enter. So to repeat, profile, space, prefix, open parentheses, your user ID, your personally assigned user ID, close parentheses, enter. Then I want you to type in LISTC again. Once you type in LISTC, you get the short list. Now, one thing I would like for you to do is you can type in send. Send is in Unix is like the wall command. You could type in send, single quote, and then type in test message, and then it ends in a single quote, and then you can put user, open parentheses, your own user ID, and then close parentheses. It sends a message to yourself. Now, if you would like to send a message to someone else, let's see, Vance, which number are you? Vance is ZIBM 017. If you would like to send a message to Vance, Vance will actually see your message. And Vance will send something back to you, like hello. And you'll see that it came from ZIBM 017. So if Vance sees any messages go to him, you just successfully sent Vance a message, and Vance will acknowledge that he got your message. Did you see any Vance from him? Okay, so Ravi has already sent something to Vance. So you got the idea, and later on, you're going to be able to figure out who's logged on to the system, too. We'll do that a little bit later. Okay, now what I would like for you to do, once you have the ready prompt, I'm going to have you type in ISPF. So from the ready prompt, type in ISPF. Once you type in ISPF, we get the ISPF Primary Option Menu. Now, I'm going to go ahead and talk about the ISPF Primary Option Menu. Of course, as I mentioned earlier, ISPF stands for Interactive System Productivity Facility. It's menu-driven. There's menu-driven panels. The user can select different options and specify parameters there. Also, you'll notice on the ISPF screen that there is different function keys at the bottom. And one thing that I've got here is, just before we move on, I actually am looking at the console of the system. Yeah, how do I, who's IBM 3? Oh, you're 3. So someone in the room here, I want to get my screen sharing session working because, yeah, he wants to see how to raise your hand. Are you 10? Like ZIBM 10? Yeah, I can see through the.
Send him the message though.
Okay. Okay, we can work on that a little bit later. This ends up being a very good session for people to try to play around a bit. And during the lunch time, I will work with people individually to practice some of this. Now, I'll log off your ID right now so you can get back on, Donato. Oh, it says right now you should be able to log on again. Okay, going back to the screen, of course we've got full screen support for displaying and information and editing because you need ISPF for a full screen editor. Also, when you think about ISPF think that ISPF ISPF is a panel. However, the panel that's there, think that you may not be seeing all of it. It could be that there is information over on the right-hand side. It could be that there's information below. In some cases, there could be information above. There could be information to the left. So ISPF provides scrolling in all four directions, right, left, up, and down. In some cases, there will be information over on the right or down, and you'll be seeing that. So think of ISPF that it's a window into the panel. Sometimes the complete window is there. Sometimes a part of the window is there, and you need to scroll in a direction to get the rest of it, and you'll be seeing that later. So ISPF has menus, panels, selections, and navigation. Oh, by the way, navigation of ISPF can be customized. So the ISPF that you're seeing in this session and the labs that we have may not look exactly like the ISPF on a system that you may be using or a client system, because ISPF is very tailorable. Many times there are a set of functions that will almost always be there, and we'll talk about those. In ISPF, notice how I've got a layout here that there is, the function is the enter, which is control on the right side. Help is F1, function key 1. You can split the screen, but I don't recommend you doing that right now. F3 is to exit and to return. F7, page up. F8, page down. Many times the F10 will be page to the right. F11, page to the left. F12 is cancel. For those of you that could not find the PA1, typically it's Alt-Insert in the 3270 emulators. It could be different on the X3270. Yeah. But also the escape key, if you locate the escape key, many times that's mapped to be the PA1 key. There is a program attention interrupt 2, which is a multi-keystroke Alt-Home. As I mentioned about cursor movement, use the arrow keys or the tab key, or use your mouse to click. You don't, in TSO and ISPF, you don't want to use clear. But the clear key is the pause. And for those of you that aren't aware of it, many times I have icons for these things. And in PCOM, if you use IBM Personal Communications, if you do a right click inside, if your arrow is inside the window and you do a right click, the icon mapping will show up for these different keys, such as PA1. Okay, I'm going to move forward. So the ISPF is panel driven and it's hierarchical. But what I want to point out is I'm going to take the cursor here, and you start out with the ISPF Primary Option Menu. Then you might select 3 utilities, and then you'll actually be presented with a utilities panel. And inside of there, there's another selection, 4, DSLIST. And DSLIST would take you to yet another panel. Well, then you would think, well, what if I want to get to a panel that maybe is over here? Does that mean that I need to go all the way back up to the root, go F3 and get here, and then F3 and go here? No. There's actually a way to jump between panels, and we'll be discussing that. I will also tell you that there are many, many, many panels. Most of those panels I've never used and don't use. There is a small set of panels I use 90% of the time. And most of the people that use the environment use these same panels 90% of the time. So we're going to be discussing those panels that are very heavily used. So I'm going to move forward. Now, you're looking at the ISPF Primary Option Menu. And for those of you that are following along, because you did get connected, you'll notice that I was putting a 3 here. However, there is one thing that I did earlier, but I did not talk about it, that for those of you that are on the ISPF Primary Option Menu, I would like for you to try to do. On the Primary Option Menu, if you would, type in on the command or option line there, just type in PF show, all one word, PF show space off. Type in PF show space off. And for you in the room, after you've done that, you'll notice that if you type in PF show, all one word, space off, the function keys at the bottom of your screen went away. Now, one reason that can be important is because you'll find after you learn to use this environment, you won't need the function keys. You've got them memorized. And I will let you know that that function keys area takes up screen real estate, and it can be masking other things. So, more experienced people will usually operate with the PF show off because they don't need that. They want more screen real estate. To get the function keys back, you simply type in PF show space on. Once you type in PF show space on, you get your function keys. So you can determine whether you want your function keys there or not. Now, what I would like for you to do is in the option line, type in 3. Like I've got it typed right there, 3. And when you do that, it's going to take you to a new panel known as the Utility Selection Panel. Once you're in the Utility Selection Panel, I want you to type in 4 on the option line, and 4 is going to take you to the DSLIST panel, which can print or display lists of data set names. It can also print or display what's called VTOC information. I'll be describing what a VTOC is later. So if you type in 4 and enter, it's going to take you to another screen, the Data Set List Utility screen. Now, I can tell you this Data Set List Utility screen gets used very, very heavily by experienced people. This one screen gets used most of the time. The reason is it lays out very nice lists. So what you get off this is data set name pattern matching. And so if you tab down to, or put your cursor on the unprotected field to the right of DS name level, and you simply type in your user ID there. So on the DS name level field, type in your ID, ZIBM0, whatever your unique number is, and if you type in your ID on that field and enter, you're going to get a list. This list you actually saw before. That's a list of your personal data sets that were put in place for this class. So this is ISPF, and what it's doing is it's finding all data sets that began with your user ID. Now notice where I have the cursor, if you enter a slash to the left of any data set, and what I recommend you do is tab or place your cursor to the left of your ID.jcl. And if you enter slash, so type in slash and then enter, you'll actually observe that it comes back and saying, what do you want to do? Would you like to edit? Would you like to view, browse? Look at all the different functions you can do. And we'll be talking about these. Now, I will let you know, I never use the slash. Most experienced people don't. If they want to edit, they type in E for edit. If they want to, let's say, for instance, delete, they'll type in a D for delete. So many times you'll memorize all these things you can do and then use those as opposed to the slash. I'm going to proceed to the next screen. So, if you do an F3, F3 will return you to the primary option menu. F3, and you may have to do it twice. But what I would like for you to do is proceed, but using F3 to go back or exit, and you'll be at the ISPF Primary Option Menu. Once you're at the Primary Option Menu, you can type in equal 3.4. Now, I will tell you that I could have done 3.4 here without the equal. I have a tendency to use the equal a lot because equal, if you're not at the primary option menu, equal is saying, pretend like I'm at the primary option menu and take me down this path. I want to go to the 3.4 panel. Almost all shops keep that the same. It's 3.4. And so no matter where you are in the ISPF environment, on the command line, if you type in equal 3.4, it will take you straight to that panel. Now, that panel gets memorized a lot by people because they use it a lot. They don't memorize many of the other numbers, but that one they do. Equal 3.4 means take me to that DSLIST pattern matching screen where I can do a lot of things. So if you type in equal 3.4, it will take you straight to the data set list utility panel. Okay? Now, we've already navigated that a little bit, but here's one thing I want to point out how the equal works. There happens to be another selection on the primary option menu, and it's called SD, and to the right of it, it says to go to System Display and Search Facility. So if you were to type in equal SD on the option line, and I'll place the cursor there. If you type in equal SD and enter, it's going to take you to the SDSF primary option menu. Now, before we look at the ISPF primary option, or the SDSF primary option menu, I will let you know that SDSF is also a panel-driven interface. And there is a primary, and then there's many functions you can do. However, I want you to know that you might find in a different client environment or the environment that you're in that you may not have all the features and functions available. Because once again, the system programmer can actually choose what you're allowed to do. I'm going to move forward. So if you're in SDSF, it'll say the SDSF primary option menu. Let's try one of the things you can do. You can type in log, L-O-G, and enter. If you type in log, that happens to be the system log. We have a whole little session on the system log coming up. So if you type in log and enter, you will see a screen that looks a little bit like this. What I would like for you to do is on the command input line, just type in top, T-O-P, top. That's the top of the log. Now what I would like for you to do is type in, actually do an F, I believe it's F11 to go right. Or excuse me, is it F11 or F10? I want I want F10. F10 would shift us to the left, and if you've actually shifted to the left, you have information that looks like this. And for those of you in the room, did you see this?
Yes.
There's control information here. We're going to talk about that control information. And then over here, starting right here where you see the cursor, is the messages that are coming out in the system log. So we've got a session on the system log. How can you view the system log interactively? You can view it from SDSF. Now what I would like for you to do is you could do F1 for help, or you could just type in help. And if you type in help or do F1 and enter, you'll see that SDSF has help, as does ISPF and the ISPF editor. I want you to know that help's available. And we're going to not look at a lot of this right now, but if you do F3, F3 is to exit the help. Once you exit the help, I believe I placed you back on the ISPF menu again, ISPF Primary Option Menu. So again, I'm going to have you do 3.4. I didn't put an equal there because I am at the Primary Option Menu. So if you do 3.4 and enter, we will be back at the dataset list utility screen that can do dataset matching. Now in this case, you may have already put in your user ID there, and if you enter with your user ID there, you will see this list we've looked at before. Now what I would like for you to do is I want you to place an E to the left of this data set. And by the way, this data set is known as a partition data set. We'll talk about data sets later. But if you place an E to the left of your ID.jcl and enter, you should see a list that looks like this. Right now, you're actually in the edit mode of the data set that I'm pointing to right now. It's your user ID.jcl, and we're in the edit mode. Now, a partition data set is a data set that has members inside of it. The members is what's got the data. Now, what I would like for you to do, there's no member in the list called edit test. But if you type in S space edit test and enter, I'm in edit mode, and if you type in S space edit test and enter, it's actually going to create a new member called edit test. How do I know it's a member? You'll observe you have a data set name, and when you open parentheses is not part of the data set name. It means this is a partition data set that has members inside of it. And the parentheses, whatever in the parentheses, is a member name. But notice that in your case, you have open blank lines. What I would like for you to do is just tab or place the arrow key on the first line and just type in something on the first line. But don't hit enter. What I want you to do is after you type in something on the first line, you can actually place your cursor on the second line using the tab key or the arrow key. Then just type in maybe 4 different lines, but don't hit enter. You type in 4 lines. Once you type in the 4 lines, I want you to observe that over on the left, it just has dots here because they consider that empty at the moment, but even though you typed in lines. Once you type that in, then to press Enter. You'll observe that to the left of each one of the lines you typed in is a line number. And the text is there. So a little bit of information about the TN3270 emulator right now. This 3270 protocol was built when we had analog lines, everything was really slow for data. Well, the whole 3270 protocol is all about working on full screens of data. And you can type in a full screen in ISPF and send the full screen and get a response back for the full screen. This is a full screen editor. We're actually using the ISPF editor here. It's an edit. There's the data set name, the member name, and we typed in this. Now, what I would like for you to do is while we're in the editor, type in profile. So while we're in the editor, type in profile. This profile is different than the TSO profile. The TSO profile is controlling the behavior of your TSO session. The ISPF editor profile is to shape the behavior of your ISPF edit session. When you typed in profile, you'll observe, now in your case, here's one of the behavior settings. Does your caps say on or off? In your case here in the room, your caps is off. Caps off means that you can have mixed case. If you have caps on, whatever you type in will automatically convert to uppercase because caps are on. You'll also notice that there's a number of other things here. One of the other really interesting things is highlight. In different languages, JCL, if you say highlight COBOL, it will actually highlight the COBOL reserved words. So it's separated out from the non-reserved words. So you can say highlight JCL, highlight COBOL. Sometimes you can say highlight auto, and it will figure out what it's looking at. But anyway, this profile is the behavior of your ISPF session. So what I would like for you to do now is type in reset. And after that reset, it's hard to see here, but after the reset, I want you to not hit enter, do reset, then this is a semicolon. Type in reset, semicolon, and I want you to know that in the ISPF settings, there is a command delimiter setting. By default, your command delimiter setting is a semicolon. It's a command delimiter, meaning you can stack commands. So if you do reset, semicolon, caps off, in my case, my caps were on. But if I do reset, semicolon, caps off, and then enter, you'll actually, the reset actually took the messages away. So reset means go away. Now, one thing I'm doing here, I want to point out how the ISPF editor works. There are things in the ISPF editor called line commands. So there's two types of commands, line commands and primary commands. You can do a combination of them, but I want to talk about line commands first. Now, many of you that are IT professionals, you probably quit counting the number of editors you've learned to use. ISPF edit is just another editor, okay, that you can learn to navigate, and it's a very powerful editor. It's very function-rich, but it has line commands. Here's an example of line commands. On the first line, you overtype the line number, and you just put a D for delete, but don't hit enter yet. So if you type in a D on the first line number, and then you put the cursor on the second line number and do R3. Then go down to the last line, overtype the line number with I2. What this is doing on the line number commands, the first one says, delete this line number, delete the whole line. The R3 says, replicate this line 3 times. The I2 says, insert 2 lines after this line. So we could type all that in, and when we do enter, it sends all of it to the system and executes it and returns back the results. So go ahead and enter. And you will observe new line numbers here because you deleted some lines, you replicated some lines, and you inserted 2 lines. Now, what I could do here, I'm going to do something else. I can delete a block of lines, DD to DD. On the line number represents a block. So there's different things you can do where I want to do things by a block. So DD to DD means delete that block. And then I can actually go over to the new lines and just insert, or actually type in the area where you type in the text in the new line field, you could actually fill that in with different information. Before you hit enter, notice here, I'm going to do a C. This is called a primary command. C for change. I want to change anything that says line to message, and I want to change all occurrences. So in my case, I have 2 different lines that say line. I want to change that literal line to message, and I want to change all occurrences. This is an example of a primary command. So here, I've got a primary command, and I've got line commands, and as soon as I hit enter, it executes all of that. So what happened was, everywhere that I had line, it changed it to message, and also I had deleted a block of lines. It turns out that there's help available, so if you type in help or F1, either one, you will get the help screen. And by the way, when you ask for help, it tries to give you help in the area that you're in. So in this case, we're in edit. And if I ask for help, it gives me help tutorial on edit. You'll observe that these may not be, this might be different on your systems. Is 13 the edit line commands? And so in the room here is, if you have a chance, is 13 the edit line commands? So you do a help. And then 14 is the primary command. So if I want to type in 13 here, it will give me information on the line commands. You'll observe all the different line commands, but you can overtype on the lines. We could step through this and get really good at the line commands. So to get out of this help for line commands, you do an F3. And if you do F3, it will take you out of help. It may put you back into edit. But what I want you to do is an F3. F3 will automatically save your changes, and it will place you back in the partition data set. If you do F3, you'll actually observe that you're still in edit mode on this data set name, and you have many members in here. But one member that you now have in here is edit test. You just edited it. It says when it was created, when it was changed, and which ID did the change or create. So from here, if you do another F3, that's going to end up taking you back to the DSLIST panel. But let me talk a little bit now about TSO. So TSO being the time sharing option, this is a command line interface, and as I said earlier, ISPF is indeed the full screen panel driven interface. We can edit data sets. Oh, we can even edit Unix files we'll talk about later. You can execute system utilities. This thing called SDSF that we just started to look at is full screen panel driven interface, and it can be used to view input queue, which we have not done yet, the execution queue. It can look at the output, and it can look at the system log that we did do. If you have the authority, you can even enter system commands when authorized. You are authorized on the system, and we will be doing that later. There is a number of books, and what I have here is in the presentation are the URLs to get to these manuals. And Bruce, one thing we're going to have to do is make sure the PDF actually can get to those manuals. And I'm going to have to fix the screen sharing during lunch here, which will be coming up. But there is a TSO bookshelf, and if you'll remember, there is a documentation section. And in the documentation section actually talks about the shelves, the ZOS bookshelves. In the ZOS bookshelves, there is a bookshelf for TSO. There is a list of manuals inside of there. There is a bookshelf for ISPF with a group of manuals. There is a bookshelf for SDSF.